Hey, and welcome to another Redefined Entertainment video. I'm Kevin, and today I'm going to be building another PC here. This time it's with a Ryzen 3. So let's get to building. Okay, so I just wanted to go over some of the parts that we have here for this project. Let's start with, of course, the most important part. This CPU here. This is a Ryzen 3 2200G. So this has a built-in little graphics processor. And we've also got this GT 710, which we know is very light, but this is supposed to just be a little build, that we can look at and just take apart. It's supposed to be just a easy, build to do. And we've also got this Thermaltake TR2 series power supply here. Of course, we got a 500 watt because we don't need it to be that big, but might as well get some little overhead room for in the future. And of course, we've got our B450 Aorus Elite motherboard here, along with, you gotta have a bunch of RGB lighting. So we got this giant roll, which we'll try to see how we can put in this case here. We've got a WD green here, 120 gig SSD. We've also got this Kingston 120 gig M.2 SSD that we're going to also put in just for even more storage. And we have 4 sticks of RAM here, which the funny part is these are actually DDR4, but the case they're still using is DDR3 on the back. But so we got a total of 16 gigs here. Okay, so here I've laid everything out that we will need for the motherboard. We have the motherboard out of its box, along with the CPU and cooler, and we've got the RAM and our M.2 storage right here. We also have one thing that we'll need from it. We have this little parts tray here, which contains this little standoff and the screw for it, which we'll need for that M.2 SSD. And of course, we have our trusty screw here. So a few things we need to do first. We need to take off these two to be able to install this and put the CPU in, get all of our RAM in. Of course, look at the proper slots, but we have 4 sticks here, so we don't need to do that, but we'll still look at that. And then we'll need to take this off and install the M.2 SSD in it. Of course, always check your motherboard's documentation for specifics on each motherboard, because as you can see, this board has 2 M.2 slots. One of them's for NVMe, and the other's for just regular SATA drives. We just have a regular SATA drive, so I've been told that goes into this first one here. So that's where we'll be installing it. And that is why we need this little standoff, is because this drive is shorter than this, so we need to install that. But the first thing we're going to do is take our screwdriver and take this original mounting bracket off. The cooler that comes with our CPU doesn't have that. So going to take these off and put them in our parts tray to the side. So now that we have these 2 plastic pieces off and all 4 of those screws off, you can see that we still have the motherboard backplate here, which this is going to screw into. So we want to just pick this up, and we just want to make sure that everything lines up and we've got the proper socket for this. And that looks pretty good. This should fit. We've got our pre-applied thermal paste right there, so I want to make sure not to just set this down on here, even though the screws will keep it off the bench. It's just better to keep it there in the protective plastic. Along with this CPU, you want to be super careful because of these pins on the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this, opening it, being careful not to drop it out, and then we're going to just pick it up by the edges, because all these pins underneath, we do not want to bend those, and we do not want to drop this either. So be super careful. And on one of these corners here, there should be a little golden arrow, which we're just going to align up with the edge of the CPU like that. There's another one on the board here. I bet that camera can see it a little better, but it goes there along with that there. This, we're just going to wiggle onto the slot and push that back down. And that's easy. The CPU is installed. So let's put this cooler on. We're going to put the AMD going towards the back I/O and just align it up on top with our screws. There we go. Looks like it should mostly fit there. And we'll just want to make sure we got this coming off. Does it reach the CPU fan? Yeah, it does. We'll plug that in later. But now this is the super important pattern. We want to go in a star pattern. So starting from up here, move this cord out of the way. We want to just tighten this down, getting it started. It will make some weird sounds because of these springs that are in. But once we start getting it, we should feel the tension start. Now we'll go to the opposite corner of that one and get it started over here. Now with all that weird creaking out of the way, we can take this and plug it in. That way we don't forget to do that later. But you should get a warning that the CPU fan hasn't been plugged in, which is good that most modern BIOSes include that. Actually, all of them should now. So we've got that installed. What do we do next? We've got all of our RAM here, but before we go and pick it up, let's look at our slots on the motherboard here. So, as we can see, we've got 4 slots, we've got 4 sticks, so just fill them all up because they're all the same size and timings and everything like that. But sometimes we only will have 2 sticks to make up maybe 8 gigs or so. We look here, this is DDR slot 1, DDR slot 3, 2, and then 4. So what we'd want to do if we only had 2 sticks, so we take this, only touching the edges of this, not where all the metal contacts are, making sure to pull both of these open. On some motherboards though, only one side pulls open. So before you go and break that off because it won't move, make sure to check if the side actually opens. But now we'll line up this notch with the notch in the motherboard there. And we want to put this in, pushing firmly down. You'll see both ends click up. We'll want to do the same thing with the next stick. If we only had 2 of them, we'd want to put it into DDR socket number 2 here. You can see, clicking it down again. I'll go ahead and install the other 2 of ours because we have all 4 sticks. So now we have all of our RAM installed. One thing that we have left is this M.2 SSD. As you can see with this, there are 2 notches in it. These are actually for 2 different keys. They have M and B keys. This one is for both, so we don't really have to worry about that. So let's just set that back down again, gently making sure to not touch those contacts. We're going to install it underneath here. So we'll take our screwdriver again and unscrew this screw, leaving it into our part bin there. And then removing this. This is just a wonderful little heatsink. And we've got to look at this drive, and we can see that this drive is only so long. So when we put it in, we can gently put it in right there. And we can see that this one actually only goes to there. So that's where we need that standoff from before to go into. So we're just gently going to take this back out and put it back over here. And then this standoff then is going to get screwed in to right there. It even has a proper screw head, so you can use a screwdriver to tighten it down. And remember, this end one does not move, so do not try to take that one out. So now we're just going to take our SSD again, put it in the slot at an angle like this, and then push it down, and then it should line right up. If it doesn't, do not force it. Take it back out and try to just re-put it in gently. So we'll just put this screw in the end to keep it down, and then this can just go right overhead. Again, it goes in at an angle, and then comes down along with the screw back into the end. And now that that's tightened down, the motherboard is done. We can go on to test this and make sure it works, or we can start preparing our case. So why don't we do that right now? So now you can see that we've moved on to the case here. I have this case prepped and I have a bunch of stuff out ready to go in it. The first thing is we want our motherboard and everything ready from our previous part. we've got our power supply here, as well as both of our drives, the drive cages from here, and our graphics card along with the power cord and 2 SATA cords. This is our power supply. As you can see, ours is non-modular, which means all the cables are already in it and you can't plug any more in. So if you need any adapters, make sure to look at the ends and check if you need those first. But now, why don't we get started with the case here. I'm going to start with laying it down and then taking our motherboard, usually by the cooler, and holding it underneath, because the cooler is just the biggest part to hold on to. But be careful though, if you put too much force on it, that can be bad and actually can damage the socket. But we'll just want to put this down in, line it up, move the back end with the I/O plate. This one, our I/O plate is already built into the motherboard, so we don't actually have a little I/O shield to pop in. But if you did, you'd put that in first. So now we just push this in, and line it up. There we go. Making sure all of our standoffs is another thing you want to check before you put it in, that the standoffs are in the correct place. But I have all of our screws and necessary stuff here, so we'll just put this down and take our screws and start putting these in. Okay, so now that we have all of the motherboard screws in, we can go ahead and start looking at some of the other stuff by picking the case back up. And let's start with our power supply here, the next big major component. Again, this is a warning. Make sure this switch is set to 115, as that is the voltage here in the US. So now we'll just take this and the 4 screws that we have for it, and we'll need to slide this into the back. So let me just put this here to show you, and then take this, and then you'll want to align this downwards. That way the air intake is towards the bottom. And put this in here, and then just screw this in. There, and now that we have all 4 of those screws in, we will want to start plugging some of these cables into the motherboard. So we obviously know where this big 24 pin has to go. It has to go right over here, so let's start working it that way. And we're just going to take this and plug it into the motherboard right there. So now another part that we need to is the CPU power. We have PCI power here, and here's the 8-pin CPU power. So we'll just route this, and it's got to go all the way up here in this upper corner. So putting it through up here, and then around and into the plug there. So we've got that. We've got SATA power for our drives. Another Molex power, some more SATA power for our other drives, and these that we don't need. So now, let's start taking some of this other cables and putting those in. Let's take our 2 SATA cables first. And we need to make sure to look at our motherboard manual, because there are 6 SATA ports on this board. But which ones do we use? Well, we want to start from 0, obviously. So we look, and this is a SATA 3, 0, and 1, but those 2 ports are disabled. Why are they disabled? Because we put this M.2 in. And when we put the M.2 in, it took 2 of those lanes and moved it over here. So make sure to check your manual for which ones are disabled. So we're just going to take these 2 cables and we're going to put them into that right angle connector there. So let's feed them through the back and gently plug them in. There we go. Now that we have those 2 SATA cords plugged in, we're going to flip this around to the back. Why? Because now we want to look at our drives. We have this SSD drive that's going to go into this little caddy. So we'll take that, we'll look at how this has to be mounted, and we'll mount it on like that. Actually, right like that. So we'll take our screws that we've taken out before and put these in. So now that I have this drive secure, we can take this and just put it in right here. There we go. That's one drive in. Now we want our hard drive. This is one of the trays, and this is our hard drive. You can see there are no screws with this, as this is completely toolless. This has a little bit of flex to it, but be careful. If these get older, especially on older systems, these tend to break. So what we do is we line up one side with little notches that come out, put them in, and then bend it a little bit, and then put the other side in. And there we go. And then we can just slide this right in down here. And now we want to take these cables that we connected before. The right angle connector is going to go down here, and the straight one is going to go over here. And now these drives need power. So some of those cables from before are going to come in handy. We want to take these and find a SATA one. So that's PCI, this is Molex, and these two are SATA. So we will want to take one of these and plug it into the bottom of this drive here. And I will take the other one and plug it into this drive over here. And there we go. We've got our drives plugged in and everything else. There isn't much left to do, is there? Well, except for a lot of cable management, but we'll do that in a second. Let's go back around to the front of this. We didn't plug in any of our USB 3.0 on the front, or our audio, or our buttons. So let's do that right now. For this, we also have this little mini speaker, which we'll be putting in right after we do the buttons. So back here, we gotta find one of these and bring them through. We will have it come up right about here. So as you can see, this cable breaks out into a few different small little cables. This is so that we can plug these in to down here. So this is the reset switch. On this, you won't be able to see it, but there's a little arrow, and that little arrow indicates the positive side. So when we look on this board, we can see the reset switch, and the positive is supposed to go on those two pins right there. Along with here's the power switch. Positive also goes onto that end. And then we can look at the power LED for this one and put it on there. That is probably the most trickiest part of this, is getting all these little pins, because sometimes there's more than just these 6. And then we take this little speaker, again, matching it up with the positive end over there. And that should do it. So now we need to connect our USB 3.0 header. That is this big guy. So that is going to have to go right there. So again, we'll go through that same cable management area. Right there. And then this has a little notch in it, so it's keyed. And we'll just plug that in right there. And there's one more, an HD audio connector they call it. And that has to go all the way over to this other end of the motherboard. So let's go back here and take this cable and pop it out right about there. And then that also has a key to it, but it goes in this way end one. And you can also find all this stuff in the documentation for your motherboard. So that should be most of this done, right? Well, there's one last thing that we don't have in yet, and that is this graphics card. So if you're going to be installing a graphics card, that'll go in one of these PCI expansion slots. So we'll want to find out which one we want to use. Usually it'll be this top really long one. And this card is odd because this is only an 8X. You can see it's only about that long. whereas this slot is that long, which means that slot is a 16x, but an 8x, of course, will be supported because lower versions are. So we're going to take this off, unscrew this PCI expansion cover. There, so we've got the cover off. We're just going to take this card, not touching the contacts again, never try to touch the metal contacts, and slide this right in to the top slot here. There'll be some sort of a little click usually just as it goes in. There'll be even more of a click when you have a full 16x card because this end piece will, snap back onto the end. So we're just going to take this screw and make sure to put it back in here to hold the card securely in place. Okay, so here we have it. I have cable managed just a little bit better, but this is going to be the first time that I ever turn it on, so let's see what happens. Oh, we get lights. We get fans spinning. Very good, very good. Let's see if we ever get a screen up here. We have no OS or anything installed, so let's just see. It's going through its startup phase. You can see the lights on the motherboard over there going through different stuff. So let's hope that this comes up. Still going through some stuff. Oh, we heard the beep. There it is! It got up. Yes, reboot and select a proper boot device. So that means that this has posted and we are good to go install Windows and get this computer fully up and running. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to follow us on social media and check out our website. The link's in the description below. And if you liked, please hit that button. If you disliked, you know where that button is. And be sure to get subscribed.